Yeah, you've got your change narrative, you've understood it, and you've been able to articulate it in a way that speaks to your audience or audiences. And
Uh-huh.
you've perhaps done your design principles at this stage as well.
Uh-huh.
So
Nice
you've
one.
understood what it is you need to do and why. And you've been able to put that out in a way that says at the end, we'll come back to this and says, have we done it? Have we not? And it
Yep.
can help
Loop
make some
back.
of those decisions as you go along.
Welcome to the Business Transformation Podcast. And in this episode, we're talking to one of those industry experts. We are speaking to Erika Henson from Oxfordshire, from Yorkshire originally. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And Erika is a organization design expert. So we are going to be talking about organization design, what the industry is doing right or wrong, where can it improve? Is there an approach that you follow? And then if you could do it all again, knowing what you've done, your experience, qualifications, etc., and the clients you've worked with, what would you do differently? Okay, so first up, organization design. This is probably like almost business transformation, digital transformation. It means different things to different people. They have a different interpretation of it. So in your words, what is organization design?
Yeah, so many different definitions, right? And it's a bit of a black box. And I think it makes it even more complicated because it often gets shortened to OD, which can also be organization development.
Yes.
So it is definitely a kind of a bit of a weird one. So from my perspective, organization design is the process of taking the business strategy, lifting it off the page and organizing the enterprise around it in a way that makes that strategy come to life in, let's say, the most efficient and effective way. So for every organization, that should be different. And it can encompass things from redesigning a structure. I'm putting pillars in place so that you organize it by, let's say, customer segment. So outwardly facing, having that structure, or it can be inwardly facing and having a functional structure. So organizing it by, say, HR and IT and so on. Those are your two big options. And then there's this kind of matrix piece as well, which covers a multitude of sins. It is a kind of a hybrid between the two. So generally speaking, an organization will have one of those three as the main structure. But org design is not just that piece. It's really taking that the next level down to say, well, what does that mean in practice then? What's the accountability split?
So actionable plans.
It's about how do you make the strategy come to life? What does that look like when you build an organization around it? So it might be you've got like an innovation pod over there because that's a key part. But it might be that you've divided up the organization to reflect different profit and loss lines. So it can be any of those things.
Yep.
But I think it goes deeper than that. And sometimes people think org design is done after you've drawn some boxes on a page. And that's it. And that's fine. And you could probably do that yourself in half an afternoon, given, enough paper and a few interesting conversations.
Yep.
It does go deeper than that, and it should. It's also about understanding how the accountabilities should be divided up. How many people do you need in a leadership team? What's the optimum number for your organization? There's also a piece around what's the governance upon it. So once you've divided up the accountabilities, you understand where decisions are made, again, to make sure there's an efficient workflow.
Yep.
How do you put a layer of governance around that to make sure that somebody's not going off in a tangent, forgetting about the strategy and just following their pet project down a rabbit hole? And also to make sure ethically things are going well. So how does that come about? And I think org design is about giving that view and bringing all together. So it might be that you've got a really strong risk department for organizations that are very heavily regulated, and it needs to be there. And they need to stand separately. So like an audit department has to have that independent view. So it can't be merged with other parts of an organization.
All right.
And org design, so it looks at the structure, it looks at how you develop the accountabilities in the decision making around the roles within that structure. And then it goes down to things like defining, therefore, how many people you might need in each of those areas, what their jobs might look like. So again, roles and responsibilities and so on, and looking at the governance around all of it. And ultimately, it can also look at things on the outskirts, although this is not something I delve into, things like where does the data need to sit? What's the IT support that needs to happen? But it also looks at fundamentals like how do we make sure we're still heading in the right direction? And it can also do things like what's the cadence of the organization? What does it need to do on a regular basis to make sure it stays on track?
All righty. Okay. So a lot in there. So first up
That's a
is,
short answer,
there's
right?
there's a lot in there, but rightly so, because it's a I think the summary being that it sets your organization up, and you talked a lot about their structure. So structurally, you're set up for with your direction, possibly your vision, and the execution of it. Roles and responsibilities, accountability, and I think implicitly saying up and down the organization, but also across, and different where it needs to be different. Yeah, so different parts of the organization, risk has to be a bit more, for maybe compliance or risk reasons. It's there, or maybe even audit. That is more regiment, less flexibility about what they can or can't do, and in other areas a bit more flexibility. But the key part being their structure, I think, came across quite strongly.
I think that's where you should start, understanding what the organization wants to do.
Yep.
So there's two approaches, right? You can say, what's the problem you're trying to solve, or what's the opportunity you want to exploit? Either one of those starts you thinking about, then how do we create the boundaries between where the work is done? And that is one of the fundamentals, right? Defining where the work should be done.
Yeah, true.
And it can be
So when you talk about the motivation there, it's like people motivated by two things: gain pleasure, so that was a opportunity, or avoid pain. So what's the problems they currently got? So that's like the questions that an individual will ask, but you're asking that at organizational level.
Yeah. And it is often, I did a piece of work with an organization a long time ago, and we kind of set it up as when we started to create the narrative, the story to share with people about what the change was and where we were going. We kind of set it up like a fairy story, and it was very much about, the knight on the horse trying to protect the castle and looking for ways to make sure that the castle stayed protected from the angry competition that were doing all kinds of new things. So it was very much a defensive measure for them because the competition was moving quickly. But that gave everybody a really good vision of what it is they were doing. In other cases, it can be very much about exploring new opportunities, doing an adventure, like maybe sending a few people out as a scouting party to see what happens if you try something new over here. Or it can be about completely turning the organization to face a new direction, trying something new, either a reflection to the context or just something they want to do. So that kind of understanding what the core thing is that you're trying to achieve is really important to help the org design, but also to help communicate it as well, which otherwise it just stays on the page. Yeah,
I think there's for the audience, and I think it might have been missed there, and you said the story and narrative, right? And take them on the journey. And I think, and this is a big part of any change or transformation is people, if you're a technologist, you would focus on technology and think it's a hard change as opposed to a soft people change. But it's the people that will use your technology. So you need to take these people along the journey. And so how important do you think this narrative is? Is it something you should do on the side, or as you said, maybe it's a starting point?
I think if you neglect it or you mess it up, the whole thing is doomed to failure, frankly.
Yeah,
and a lot of it depends on the leadership team, right? How committed are they to making sure people go with them? And I think org design can be this kind of thing that people do in a darkened room behind closed doors and then come out and go, da-da! We've done it. And everybody goes, okay, crack on. We're just going to be over here dealing with the customers and doing what we try to do to make things carry on. You go carry on with what you're doing, but we're basically going to ignore that until you go away. And I think that often happens, maybe not quite as blatantly as that. But I'll often go into organizations and they'll go, oh yeah, we've tried this before. Org design, we didn't like it. We didn't like that. It didn't work. And they get that level of cynicism. And it's because nobody ever really understood why there was a change happening, how it was going to impact them. Or by the time they found out about it, it was just very, very negative. And that you have to do this differently. And it was, well, if you'd have asked me, we wouldn't have done it that way.
And that's why you're there. So the back to the question there was, what is the organization, the industry doing well and not well? So it sounds like in terms of not well, it is maybe the narrative isn't there, and then I think probably now inherently in the industry or organizations that they've been through some form of change before and they didn't get the results they want. And so to quote you, you said they're cynical. And so how do you approach that then? you've come in, and then the business is going, here we go. We'll give this one how long until they rotate this consultant, and then So how do you approach that one?
I think different strokes for different folks. It depends on the culture of the organisation, right? So if the culture is very top down, you can get away with that a little bit more by saying leadership team are fully engaged, and they've decided this is what we need to do. I think as well, if the issues are very well understood throughout the organisation, if the leadership and management team have been very open and saying, we're trying this new venture, we want to diversify, we want to focus on something specifically, people already understand what it is you're trying to do, what the strategy is, what the purpose of the business is, whether that's a change or just the general direction, then that really helps, because then you can go in and say, and this is how we're trying to achieve that by making some adjustments here and there, because we need new skill sets. Let's say we suddenly want to go into AI. And who doesn't, right, these days? It's the latest thing. Everybody wants a little bit of AI, but there's not going to be many experts out there yet. So very much everybody's on a learning curve. So I think it's about being honest with people and saying either we need to try this together, we need to understand what works well so we don't get rid of it accidentally. And we also need to just keep everybody focused on that path. So you can do it with the management team top down if the culture is top down, bureaucratic and quite directional, and if the situation you're in is quite well understood. If neither of those things are in place, then you do need to have a much more collaborative, engaging process. And the problem with that, Heath, it's difficult, it takes longer, so ultimately it costs more money and it disrupts business as usual. Generally speaking, with the best intentions in the world, organizations will often kind of shy away from it at some point. So I think one of the key tasks for a consultant coming in is to be able to have a clear view of what the organisation really is committed to doing. So you don't start it and then stop halfway, which is worse than not starting. You've got a clear pathway on how to do it, and you get it through quite quickly.
Yes,
because the longer it lingers on, the harder it gets.
So the note there for the audience there. I think I was a couple of calls ago on a couple of podcasts. I said, we're going to change the name from business transformation. We're going to change it to, what was the word I came up with? Turnaround. Because the transformation has got what's the word? Synonym, where it's associated with something very similar, is it goes on forever and doesn't end. And it's like, well, we're in a transformation here. And it's like, well, it's a 3-year one, or it's a 5-year one, or it's a 7-year one.
Yeah.
So what transformation? You sure you should call it turnaround. So get in there and do it quickly, get it done. Otherwise, it's a bugbear. People are sick and tired of it. They see you coming, say, oh no, there's that guy, there's the girl that's drumming on this thing, and it never ends. Yeah. So a sense of urgency.
Yeah, and I think one particular approach that banks do quite well is they often will split out a team to say, okay, you guys carry on with doing, basically running the bank, and you guys over here, you're going to do the change bit, you're going to change the bank, and they run the two pieces of work in parallel, and that frees up people that want to do project work to really get involved, heavily engaged, and you get a lot of expertise in that, you get a lot of knowledge and culture built into it, so it's not just external parties coming in and doing it to them, but you've also got people that are not constantly getting pulled into workshops they don't want to be in, or cancelling workshops at the last minute that the consultant stood there with 2 people going, it's not going to work then. So they do that quite well, working the 2 streams in parallel. Other sectors tend not to do that. They tend to pull people out as and when, and it can sometimes be a bit messy. But
disruptive,
a sense of urgency, like you say, is really important to just keep it cantering along so people just don't get bored.
Yeah. So there's an earlier point you said about if probably two approaches. If you had the top-down approach, and you can say from the management, and then the second part of that being as if you had a general agreement or consensus with the organisation what the issues were they're trying to address. So that's a bit of a big if. There was one project I did for Ministry of Justice. Actually, I don't know if I should say their name, Ministry of Justice, but anyway, it was one of their biggest transformations as part of their £1 billion reform change program, and that was the transformation of the Her Majesty's Court and Tribunal Service. So 53 sites around the country, 1,500 staff. They wanted to rationalise the staff down to 450, and then reallocate the staff to different parts of the government. And then those 53 locations to 3 central locations. And so they already had a couple of, I won't say any names, PwC and EY, who came in here before for a year and a half and got nowhere. And then they said, and so they brought me in and they said, we want to do it differently. So I went to the program manager, program director, and the program project director, program director, project manager, and then the project manager, program manager, project manager. And I got the approach agreed. And they said, okay, now you got to take it to the sponsor to get it supported at the board. So I went to the board and the sponsor goes, Heath, yep, I understand your approach. There's 6 steps, great. I want you to start at step number 5. And I said, why is that step number 5 design? And it says, yes. I said, you want me to design your future target operating model and roadmap for implementation without understanding the vision about where you want to go, the governance, you talk about the governance, about who's involved. We've got the right people in the room making decisions. We don't understand the current organisation today. And he goes, Heath, there's 53 sites around the country. They do this thing, their business 53 different ways. And I said, great, just pick one. We'll just call that the baseline. And those were aspirational for some, and it's going to be, best endeavors for others. But at least it's agreed baseline. He goes, Heath, they've been doing this business for 20 years. I said, and they know the problem. And I said, funny you say that, because I've been invited into your workshops with the supplier you've already chosen before you've understood the current operating model. And your team is arguing in front of your supplier you brought in about what the problems is today because you haven't agreed on it. And then he goes, no, it's not going to work. And I said, okay, just pick the one. And he could see, that makes sense. And then he goes, okay, fine. You can do it your way, but I disagree with it. And so I came back in 9 months' time with the target operating model. We'd already rationalized a lot of it. We already found 20 million of unclaimed long-term fines are written off because they couldn't follow the process where all the money was. And then he stops the meeting in the board meeting. He goes, Heath, I just want to make a special mention, and gets the note taker. I said, can you write this down, please? Heath, you did not only what you were asked to do, you delivered the time and the roadmap, but you did the unthinkable. I said, what's that? He said, you've documented the undocumented business. And I said, in 20 years, if not, I said, I had an approach, but I don't know your business. I said, your people know the business. And I asked you to put people together for the team. And it was actually your people who went on around the country that did the workshops. It was your people. And the reason why it went so well, I think, to some of the things you're saying is it's because your people were talking to your own people. And it was your people talking to themselves that they go, hey, they're one of us. And that's how come we got the buy-in that it did, because it wasn't me doing it. It wasn't external parties. It was your own team talking to your own team. I said, and so when I left, I sent out the final email and I said, guys, what you've just done in half the time that two big four guys couldn't do, in twice the time, and you did it yourselves. It's like a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it. You've got it now, you've got to use it. This is you talk about the BAU stuff and versus change. You are now the change department. You've got to use it. And I think that part, some of the things you're saying is like that's what the industry is not doing well, is like recognizing if you get your people to do it, even better. Build capability, but there's a lot in there. But I think the skill is actually, if you want to find out the answers, it's in the team yourself, the people that have the answers.
And I think that's one of the issues. I think a lot of organizations downplay the talent and the understanding a lot of their people have of the business. But part of that is because some organizations are very good at communicating where they are in space, what it is they're trying to achieve and why. And people buy into that. They do. They often feel really strong loyalty to organizations. It's perhaps is not reciprocated as it should be. I think, modern times is much less about that kind of sense. But actually, when I've worked in organizations, even the most cynical, they genuinely want the best for the business, or if not for the business, at least for their customers, the people that deal with. And whether that's B2B or B2C, they really want to do the best they can. And most people want to do a good job. I'd say, like 99%. And they want to do it easily, though. They don't want people to put blockers in their way. And they don't want external people to come in and tell them they're doing it wrong. And here's the better way. They want to be asked, what are the problems that you're facing and how can we make it better? I think some people do struggle with change, right? And like all of us, you have a problem, what the solution is, and you still don't do it.
Yeah.
It's not because you don't know the answer, it's just because it's difficult to change. And I think that's where external people can help. And I think they can also help to put it into a context of, remember, this is what we're trying to achieve. This is a problem we said we wanted to fix.
Yep.
And this is the way we've all agreed how we want to do it. Or if not all agreed, at least we've understood why we're going in this direction.
Yep.
And let's give it a go.
Yeah.
And I think org design as well, it's not once and done.
Mm.
And I know people like to say that, but it is continually evolving because an organization changes all the time. The context changes and people changing. You have a turnover of people. So people come in with different ideas.
Yeah.
And the more that people change, the culture changes too.
Yes.
And sometimes I've gone to an organization and the only reason the kind of thing works is because you've got maybe 3 people that work like crazy and collaborating together. Yeah. And if you lose those 3 people, collaboration will pretty much dry up. And you're going to need to build something in that it's got a proper process and it's got roles attached to it, because it's working because these 3 people want to do the best they can. They know each other, they work together, and they understand and they talk. But it's down to individuals sometimes, and that's a big risk, right? If you annoy these people or you don't listen to them,
the
they
key
will
person,
find something better.
The key person risk. Yeah, you said an interesting point there about the remember, like so you're reminding the people. And so remember, like I used to print out before it was maybe what's the word, not unsociable, but not eco-friendly. Used to print out a lot of the blueprints, and I'd stick them on the wall or put it in my folder, and I'd purposely open up the folder or put it right in the middle, like the design principles, and then they'll be arguing about. And I said, "Excuse me, remember this? We had that workshop." And that was a concern and tension. We addressed it by the principal. There's a principal. And I said, oh, yeah. So how quickly you forget. We just did it last week.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was all the time. Yeah. And I think, you hear this thing all the time, right? 70% of change efforts fail. I hate that.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think it's even not evidence-based.
Yeah.
But I think it's also because often at the end of the program or the project or the restructure, whatever it is, you don't get the design principles back on the table and say, did we achieve them?
Yeah, how did we go?
What you've been left with, did it meet all of these principles, and how did we achieve them? And has it solved the problem or exploited the opportunity? And I think that can often be the missing piece. And like you say, if people think, actually, do you know what? We did achieve all of this. Now, it may be that the world has moved on slightly. So we need to keep working because we're always going to be having to stay one step ahead and try to beat the competition and, make sure that we're meeting ever increasing demands and desires and changing our approach. But if that's what we said we want to do and we've achieved it, well, that is successful change.
Yeah.
We just need to keep going, perhaps, and you can't rest on your laurels ever. But
celebrate the celebrate the wins.
Celebrate the wins.
Yeah, it's actually one of the previous clients I'd bring in afterwards, celebrate the little wins, and it was new philosophy for them, although they talked that they were agile. And they said, we've got to celebrate these little wins on the way. And then I'd bring in the chocolate eclairs and like really heavy, real sugary stuff. And I'm gluten intolerant, so unfortunately I couldn't have it. But I was feeding everyone else, and they go, "Hey, you're not taking any part." But yeah, you've got to. I'm a big fan of that. Celebrate the wins, and so it helps build momentum. Okay, so I also said something earlier, but that I wanted to pick up on it is that you talked about. I asked the question if you had been through it before, if they'd been through a particular change before, and one of my projects I had done before was a Solvency 2 at FSA. And I asked them when I started, I said, okay, this wouldn't be the biggest regulation change you guys have done before, right? I said, no, we've done Basel 2 banking. And I said, great. So Basel 2, very similar to Solvency 2, industry regime change. Great. Okay. So we got lessons learned from that one. And they said, oh, no, there isn't any. I said, well, was it a quick project or something? Well, how long did that? I was going, because what I usually find is either the lessons learned weren't captured or the incompletes, and so I said, well, you didn't even have it. I said, okay, that's interesting. I said, so what about the staff then? Yeah, we ran for a few years, right? Have you still got the staff here? And I said, oh yeah, that girl that you went to her farewell yesterday, that was the last remaining staff member on the pro. I said, oh my God, guys, there's like lessons in the organization that you got to take stock, and yes, so that's the point you're saying is. Yeah, it's
that institutional memory, right? It doesn't just
that's the word
stay around by itself. You are reliant on particular individuals, and often it is not documented, and it's really difficult to get people to write things down. But you need to share the stories, the horror stories and the good stories.
Yeah. So okay, so in terms of what the industry is doing well and not well, not well. There's a few things, a few lessons learned there. But in terms of good things, there is, well, generally it's the strategy, well-run structure, accountability, roles and responsibilities. I think, and then the governance around those decision making. They may have got that right, maybe. And you said, and I think you haven't said it explicitly, but implicitly, maybe you said it before we got on the call, talking about the cookie cutter approach. It seems like you don't apply, or maybe there's no such thing as a cookie cutter approach. Like I had one of the guests on saying there's no such thing, and she's a technologist. She said, and there's no such thing as a technology project. And I said, that's interesting you say that because you're a technologist. She said, oh, no. There's, there's no technology projects, there's business projects. Maybe technology is enabling the business, but there's no technology projects. And it's like there is, and as you're saying, there's different approaches, different strokes for different folks. And so,
yeah, I think my philosophy is very much every organization has a different strategy. Therefore, every organization should have a different design.
Yep.
And when you're working with an organization and they say to you, where has this been done before? And it always fills me with a slight dread, because I think, oh, please don't go down that path. And I get it. I get people want the reassurance that they're making a change and therefore that means a risk. And they would like to know it's a guaranteed risk, right? You've done it before. And I think the trouble is, if you have an organization and you give them the exact same design as another organization in the same sector, they're probably going to have similar results, and it's not going to give them the edge that they want.
Yep.
And I think as well, perhaps it's a personal thing, but I don't like doing the same thing twice. And I think it's almost a lazy thing to do, is to say, oh yeah, I've done this before, it's off the shelf, let's just bang this in.
Yeah.
Firstly, every organization is different, the culture is different, the people are different, the environment is always going to be different, so it's never going to have the same results. And I think you just need to be really careful about trying to shoehorn something in just because it worked somewhere else. I think fundamentally there are certain structures. There's not that many different types of structures that you can do, and you kind of normally lean towards one based on what the strategy tells you, but you have to have a bespoke approach. And I've worked across many different sectors. So I've done education, I've done charitable, I've done manufacturing, I've done financial services, I've done professional services, I've done central government, possibly more. And I like that. And I think what I can bring is that experience from looking at different industries and saying, do you know what works over here? Actually, we might want to twist that around a little bit and see if we can use part of that as a model. But I think there is a danger when you go to organizations that go, oh, we want someone that's done this before in the same industry, in the same sector. And you think, why would you want that? That would be just like borrowing somebody's old clothes and trying to look better than them, because you're never going to, right? You need to have your own clothes. Or if you're going to use somebody's old clothes, at least do it differently, spice it up a bit, put them on in a different order, bang on a hat or something. And I think that's organizations always need to take that approach, right? They need to understand that they are special. They are different. They should really take hold of what their strengths are and promote those and hang on to those. That uniqueness. So but there are certain large organizations, right, that make a living out of selling something that they've done before, and they just need to implement it here. And I think it can be a real mistake for small organizations to buy that, because I think it can be quite misleading, and it can be disappointing for them as well, right? Not mentioning names, Heath.
So there's a for the audience, and I think this is for organizations that go for these change and transformations, and and I think what you're saying is a lot of organizations don't want to be guinea pigs to try something new, so they want to try something that's trusted. And then the challenge there is that they want to do almost the same as what was done in a similar, as a competitor or a similar industry, or even the same industry. And it's like, well, one that follows the crowd never goes further than the crowd. So you're going to just be as good, but not better. And then if you adopt the same process, and to the point you're saying about not bespoke and not customized in any way, is it fit for purpose then? It's probably not. And I get a lot of guys that will read my book and they'll say, Heath, I've read your book. I'm reading your book and I'm trying to apply it word for word. And I was going, well, thank you for reading the book. I really appreciate it. But on the front, it says the word framework, which means, and this is where you're saying it, lazy. It's like, don't be lazy. That's the critical thinking part. You need to apply it appropriately and proportionally. So you need to think. And that's, I think, what back to our earlier point was, what they in the organizations or industry doing right or wrong or good or bad. It's like, start using your critical thinking skills where you can, and don't just follow cookie cutter, because it's probably end up one way is one at best, not better than the competitor, at worst.
And related to what we were saying earlier, that really crushes people in an organization. If you go, we've got all the answers and we just need you to implement it, and they just go, this is not going to work. I think, like you say, you need to come in with a framework. You need to come in with a process of how to get to the end state. That is often what an external consultant can bring. Kind of the experience of, actually, I've got lessons learned from all over the place, so I can avoid the minefields for you. And I've got this process that we can work through that will give you the pace that you're after. It will engage with the right people at the right time. It's not the answer. I'm not coming in with the answer, but perhaps what you're coming in with is like the walls and the roof to the house. This is what you need. You absolutely have to have governance. You have to have a clear idea of how you're going to get the strategy into reality. And you need to know these pieces. But the rest of it, where you're going to put the doors, how big the windows need to be, how you're going to decorate it, what the flooring is going to be, where the interconnecting doors are. That's what the people in the organization are really good at defining. And you just need to connect with them and get them thinking along the same lines. I mean, you can't have everybody having their own individual design, otherwise you end up with a nightmare. But they are really good at that, knowing where the connections needs to be and the problems that can be avoided.
Okay, so that what brings us on to our second point, was that the approach. And you said there's a process, a framework. Okay, so having many as you were saying, different industries, silo sectors, organizations, clients that you've helped over the years, a couple of decades there, I think I sneakily saw on your profile. So what is the approach that you follow there? Do you have an approach? And I'm sure you do.
I do, I've got an approach. Who hasn't got an approach, right? Everyone's got their own one. I think fundamentally, when you go and meet a client for the first time, it's about listening. And you can't overemphasize that. As I said earlier, it's about understanding the problem and understanding the opportunity, and really understanding that. And I think that's the first point. And that's, people go, oh that's your discovery phrase, right? I think for org design, one of the other things that's really important to understand is the politics and the culture and the power and the agendas of your sponsor and of your key stakeholders. And that is a really is when you get into the black box bit, right? Because it's not stuff you ever want to write down. Like, such your body's interested in this. But in your head, you need to retain that thought, because ultimately you're there to give the client what they want. Now, there are lines nobody's going to cross. Everybody's got their own limits, right? And their own value judgments about where they want to work and how far they want to go. But if the client wants to go down a certain path, all you can say is, okay, well, impact, consequences, let's talk about, and let's throw out some different options for you. But if they want to go down a certain path because they've got this idea that they want to leave a certain legacy, or they are protecting a certain power base, or they are protecting a certain individual or kind of, group of individuals in their organization, it's not your job to go in and say, well, that's wrong. That's not the answer. I think what it's about is understanding what the sacred cows are, and maybe challenging some appropriate.
Momentarily lost you there.
But you have to have culture really. Oh, sorry.
That's right. So did you just say culture?
Culture. I think it's really important you understand that. And you have to understand the politics and what the client and the key stakeholders, of course, they want to do the strategy, but underneath that, they will also have personal aims, whether this is my route to retirement, and I'm going to do this to leave the business in a good place, and this will be my last big hurrah. It might be, I want to get a transformation on my belt so I can move on to another organization and get the next step up in my career. It might be, I want to protect these people and leave that as my legacy, and I want to make sure that everybody's treated fairly and there's no unnecessary redundancies, and that everybody feels loved, because that is what I want to leave behind as my legacy in this organization. You need to understand that, and you need to build it into the way not only you roll out the program, but also the decisions that are made and how they're made and how they're communicated. So I think that's the first bit for me, is really having that.
Yeah. Okay. So for the audience, I think this is the first time, I think we're 30 or something odd podcasts now, and that's the first time that someone's actually talked about politics, has brought it up as a key point. It's almost like what's the term? It's like the unspoken word almost. The things that you can't talk about. And it's like, well, that's probably the reason. That's probably the thing that's stopping you changing or transforming, is that the things you can't talk about.
There, right? I mean, everybody knows it's there. We can tiptoe around it, but I think it's dangerous to ignore it when you're doing design. With some bits you can, of course, but when you're doing a fundamental org design and you're doing the whole thing, you need to understand the politics. Otherwise, you're just creating a problem for yourself, and there's unnecessary fights you're going to have. So I think that's the first bit.
Okay.
And then it is also, ideally, right, we were talking about what works well, what doesn't. I think there's been a real push in later years to move towards evidence-based decision-making and data-driven stuff.
Yes.
I don't think it's quite there yet, but it's a good movement, right? It's a good place to start, and that kind of often come up against the politics. So you gotta be careful, but you can use that to kind of help justify some decisions.
If you can't see the evidence, you got to be wondering what's the reason for it, and it's like, there's a personal objective or underlying something going on here, agenda. All right. So we established the baseline, the opportunities. You've understood, got the context of the political landscape. What's everyone's vested, maybe the what's in it for me. Everyone's got their what's in it for me. So you've understood that. Everyone's got their little radio station tuned in. Yep.
Yeah, you've got your change narrative. You've understood it, and you've been able to articulate it in a way that speaks to your audience or audiences. And you've perhaps done your design principles at this stage as well. So you've understood what it is you need to do and why. And you've been able to put that out in a way that says, at the end, we'll come back to this and says, have we done it? Have we not? And it can help make some of those decisions as you go along.
Okay.
So I think then you get into the exciting bit, you get into the design bit.
So we're out of discovery, we're in design now. Yep.
Yeah. And that's where you get to be really creative. And I would encourage people to be really creative, not just say, how can we change what we've got, but how can we make what we want to do happen and work back from there, rather than what have we got at the moment.
Yep. Okay.
And
so
then
so just on that point, so the audience doesn't miss it. So you weren't thinking about what you, in terms of capability or competency, what you currently had today, but what you would want in the future, and then working backwards.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, a lot of organizations probably don't think that way. They think of, well, given the resources we've got and the budget we have, well, let's do what we, then because what you're saying is it wasn't a step change, or it was just a little minor change.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would definitely encourage people to think, where is it your strategy is going to get you? Where is it supposed to get you in whatever that time frame is, 5 years? And what would you need to look like at that point in order to change it? And then you work back.
5 years, work back. Yep.
Yeah. So, come up with a few options. Look at what it would be if you organise around customer segment, or maybe if you organise around geography, or if you organise around functional base, or if you organised around, I don't know, wherever your particular products are. So there's a few options, and you can look at how would that enable a strategy to come to life? Mm-hmm. What would it mean? What were the risks? What's the pros and cons of these? As you start talking that through with some of your key stakeholders, you can start to form a picture of, okay, so that one's too far. That's not going to be right. Yep. This one's not just going to be effective, or it's maybe too close to what's been happening before. And that can be a really good reason to chuck it out, not because it's not the best solution, but because it's too similar. And then you really need to start looking at, if one of these is having a real strong view, you need to get it looked at by people in the business. And depending on the organization, that can be a workshop for 150 people that look at it over a few days and kind of take it apart and put it back together and really explore it. Or it can be just working with a much closer group of stakeholders.
Okay, so you've come up with some solution or options. You've pros and cons, maybe good, better, best. And interesting, you said you organized around certain elements as opposed to saying people, customers, products, maybe markets. First, you organize yourself around there and then come up with your options. Others might, there's a term here that the current client likes to use around services. They want to organize around services, and some people would call them value chains. And the challenge, the challenge with this organization, at least, is that word services is a real foreign concept to them. And so they struggled with it. When I joined the program 1 year in, and I'm leading a couple of work streams, and the heads of these divisions are saying to me, I was going, you've been at this for a year. This is not the first time you heard it, but you still don't understand. I'm saying, Jesus, I don't think it's your fault. I think it's the guys on the program have decided to create some terms and throw it at you, and you've got to deal with it. So I think the part of that is, and probably with the politics, is that you've understood maybe the language, the common language in the organization. And if there wasn't one, then I would always, when I start part of the governance, would be say, okay, let's get some glossary of terms here. You call something case management, but you call it delivery. And we call it the same thing. Technology likes to call everything service delivery, but in the business, they call it case management. And so then that's the part you talked about earlier. If the project was actually creating terms for the business, and the business is going, I don't like this. They're telling me, and it's like, they've already created, silos between these two departments. It's like, oh my God, we just started.
It can be a real problem.
Yeah. Okay. So we're out of discovery. We're into design. We've got some options. We've shortlisted them. We've got the key stakeholders now kicking it around.
You test it. Yeah, they test it, pick holes in it, come up with something better. And then hopefully at the end of that, you go, actually, this is the way we want to go. And then you take it into the next stage, which is really that more detailed design of, so what capabilities do you need? How big would it be? And really refining some of those accountabilities and remits and responsibilities, and really understanding what skill sets you're going to need. Is it going to change?
Yeah, that's where you get. Yeah. Okay. So not much training needs, but skill needs. The gap between where they are today and the future. All right. Okay.
And then I'll go into the deliver phase, and that's when you actually start to think about, okay, so what's the change plan? How is it going to impact the teams? Is this something that can be learned? Is it something you need to buy in? Is this a new skill? Is this something that we can retrain people or move them across? And that's where you kind of go to that. So does this mean we do one big jump and make the change, or do we do incremental changes over a period of time?
Yeah.
And you know where you want to get to, and where the strategy demands you end up. But what's the path to get there? And it might be some organizations can make a really quick change and go there straight away. And they go, right, let's just do it and take the knocks early on. And we're going to make mistakes, but we'll get it over with. Other organizations like to do it in phases. Whatever works best, whatever they think is going to be the best way. And that's when you also iterate, massively iterate. And I think that's one of the things I would hang on to along with bespoke. You need to keep adjusting, because you might have come up with, this is a great model, and we've spoken to all these people and everybody agrees this is the best solution, but there'll still be like 10% of stuff that it's just not going to work for. The workflow's broken, and there's outliers, and there's cases over here that are just always different. And the reason why you need to keep this thing is because such a body here, and 20 years ago we made this promise and it's in there and we can't get rid of it. So that's that piece, right? And it doesn't mean you need to change the whole design, but it is where you start to understand the outliers and the exceptions.
Okay. There's a well-kept secret in business transformation that no one is talking about. And that's 70% of business transformations fail, wasting time, money, and missed opportunities. There are 4 common causes of project failure: lack of business user involvement, lack of senior leadership support, changing requirements, and incomplete requirements. Clients, however, don't know this, and more importantly, they don't know what to do. They're either told they need reams and reams of beautiful PowerPoint presentations, but they're really just marketing documents. Marketing for the consultancy to convince you of the more work they will bill you for. They are just designed to run up the billable hours, or they're told to send their staff off to do training to get certified in old, outdated methods that result in 70% failure. Clients know if they bring in the Big Four, they'll get a Big Four bill and no transformation. They load the project up with junior staff that produce interesting but useless documentation that they will tell you it is needed, that is full of jargon and the latest buzzwords. It sounds very impressive, but means absolutely nothing. It's well known in the industry. You get a Big Four in, they'll steal your watch to tell you the time, and you pay them millions for the favor. That's the old broken model of business transformation. If you're ready to move to the new model of business transformation, join me. My name is Heath Gascoigne, and I'm the author of this book, The Business Transformation Playbook, How to Implement Your Organization's Target Operating Model, TOM, and achieve a 0% failure rate using the 6-step Agile framework, HOBA, House of Business Architecture, that I created and have been using for over 15 years with my private clients, including the UK government, FTSE 100 companies and startups. I'm the guy the clients call to come in and set up and turn around their failing transformations. If you're a business owner, leader or manager, a change or transformation consultant, or you lead one, and you want to move to the new model of transformation, I'm holding a free 90-minute masterclass to get your 2023 year off to the best possible start with your transformation. Make sure you join me. You need to know where and how you're going wrong and what exactly you need to do and only do, not boiling the ocean, trying to do everything, especially how to don't get caught in the interesting but useless documentation trap, and how to avoid joining the 70% that fail, but instead join the top 30% club that make business transformation a success first time, on time. Details how to register are below this video. Click the link below. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, we'll get you started. So the key part there for the audience, you're talking about iterate. So nothing is like gold-plated or locked in. It is up for change. And I think that, and now that may not be, so culturally of an organization, maybe if it's banking or maybe although that particular example you said the banking is good with this change, they got a BAU and they got change projects. But if the culture isn't open to this continuing or testing and being wrong and getting it wrong, then they go, oh, I don't want to, like in school, you're told, everything must be right, and therefore you only try if you know the answer. And if you don't know the answer, you don't want to try. And so it doesn't encourage that creativity part. And I think you said it at the beginning there, this is where in design you start being creative. Now, there is some organizations that may struggle with that creativity, or some that go to the far end, like one client I supported or helped with their target operating model, and they'll say, so what's the approach you like to apply here to do that? And I'll go, we fail fast. Okay. And I go, okay. And they will fail. They would say that word, fail fast, so fast that you're like, it just comes off your tongue. Like, and I said, how do you go with those? And they've got like a portfolio of projects that never delivered. And because they go, oh, but we failed fast. I said, you got to step back at the beginning of that sentence and say, why are you doing the change in the first place? And then go ahead and try and fail fast. And if it doesn't work, but you're just trying everything without thinking. So it's good you got your willingness to try new things, but you got to understand why you're trying new things.
Yeah.
Have you found that?
What's the end game? Yeah. What you're trying to achieve. Does it fit with the strategy?
Yeah. Right? But like I think one of the guests who talked about one time, he said the first thing you do is stop. When they start, the first thing I do is stop. And I said, what do you mean stop? He said, stop the things, stop everything. And I said, well, stop everything. He said, yeah, because what you find is that might be trying to do too many things. I said, that's interesting. The first thing you do when you start is to stop. I was going, wow, that's interesting. Like these guys here would have been, how about you stop just failing fast and thinking about why you're failing fast. I know it's, everyone's got maybe your sense of urgency there is we got to go fast. So, well, first let's think about it before we start throwing, money after it. Okay. So we went from discovery, design. No, sorry, we were in discovery, then we're in design, then delivery, and we were in delivery still.
Yeah. So in delivery, it's also about summing it up, right? Making it work. So you've put people into the new roles, you've recruited what you need, and you've got people working through processes. So it might be that you've engaged a load of people to develop new workflows in this new pathway, whatever that, that structure might be. They're picking up their new job design and they're working with their new accountabilities. And, to your point, it's a good one. They're picking up new responsibilities. What are they also letting go of? And that is important to get them to document that. It's the most important thing. What are we stopping doing? And it's the hardest thing in the world to get people to stop doing things, which is odd because everybody tells you how overworked they are, right?
Mm.
And it is difficult, but I think people need to know that they are backed to stop doing things, and that their management really understands why, and they understand that there's little value in that thing, and we
Yeah.
can absolutely get to go, or outsource it, if it's very transactional, that's an option.
Yeah. I think I like that
And
where
then,
you said that. So this the stopping part, like that's a good. And I think that when you said it's allowed to, you're allowed to. I think giving the management giving the staff permission is you do have permission to stop, or you have permission to not do what you were doing before, and it's okay. Well, I did a home office transformation, and there was automated a lot of the out of country application forms, and they were so impressed with the automation they did. But what they wanted, I think we were doing like 10,000 applications a month, and the goal was like 25,000, and that was actually slowing down after all the automation. And they're going, well, they're looking through understanding the process, go, what's going wrong, and they saw that what the objective was to get the low skilled apprentice, basically employees with the lower grades, less expensive, to assess the low risk applications, so it would cost less, low risk. And what they're finding, and then in the high risk would go to a more senior person. What they're finding is all applications, regardless of low risk or high risk, was getting escalated to the manager, and the manager had to go and sign everything off. And although all staff had the authority to approve it, because they were given the authority, and they were asked the question, why are you escalating everything? And they said they didn't feel they would be supported in their decision. I was like, we just spent millions of dollars in this whole process, and you've now, it came down to people that they didn't feel supported. Yeah. And to your point there, where you said you are allowed, they were given permission. I think that for the audience, you can do all the change in the world, but if the people element, if they don't feel supported, you don't give them permission, your efforts might not be. Yeah.
It's show me you mean it, isn't it? Show me you mean it, and show me that you'll stand behind me when I actually do what you've asked me to do, because inevitably there will be some level of fallout, right? If you stop doing things.
Yeah, show me you mean it. I'm going to quote you on that one. I've got a few quotes actually. Yeah, strategy and reality. I like the last one you said before about every organization has a different strategy, therefore requires a different organization design. That's like, you don't apply the cookie cutter, you're not going to go better than the competition. All right, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, good. And then my fourth phase would be develop. And that's where typically I would expect the consultant to step away.
Yeah. And
the develop phase can last until they've implemented everything and achieved their strategy, or times have moved on, it's time to do something again. But this is where you get into that good stuff about continuous improvement. But it's where the organization owns it themselves. Everything's getting embedded. People are not going back to what they used to do before. They're not falling back into old habits and relying on conversations and relationships. They've actually moved into this new way, this new pathway, and they don't need to be reminded to do it now. They're owning it, and they're changing it as they need to make it better and to make it work well. And I mean, in the kind of like service language, it's about having that service improvement program, but it has its own cadence, it has its own energy, and the people that are those service owners actually make it happen. They're no longer asking for permission, right? It's no longer part of the program. They just know in order
part
to
of their behavior now.
That's the thing that has to happen.
You've properly embedded the change now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it doesn't stop improving. Hopefully.
Yeah, you said an interesting part where you said this consultant steps away. And that's so for all the other consultants, for the audience that's listening here, and I'm glad you said that. I love to hear it, because it's like the job said consultant, right? It didn't say full-time employee. The job isn't to stay forever. This job is to impart the knowledge and the experience, and then you've now got it and walk away. I think I had, who was it? Tom West, a couple of guests previously, and he'd talk about, when I start, I'm in the water with them, and I'm in the boat, and then I'm in the water, and then I've got the life jacket, and then I'm standing on the beach, I think he said, with my speaker, and so they're on their own. I said, that's a good analogy, man. I said, that's to the point. There is like, step away.
Yeah. And I should probably qualify. I mean, like, the org design consultant should step away. it might be absolutely the right point for the continuous improvement consultant to step in.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
But, for like in the org design world, I think if you're still there during that develop stage, something probably gone slightly wrong. And it's probably time to look at, was this the right solution? Why is it not quite taken on yet? Why hasn't it got its own momentum? It should be, running off now and kind of finding itself and developing its own life.
Yeah. Okay. So for the audience there, that we've got to a point, we've gone through our 4 stages, and then we've got the organization to a point where they are self-supporting, self-empowering. What's it like? An agile team is self-empowering is the term they use. Is it the term? Self-directing.
Not sure. Oh yeah, self-directing. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're at that point, and whether the org design consultant steps away and the continuous one comes in, or maybe that changes hats and now you're in continuous improvement.
Maybe.
Or maybe, yeah. But to bear in mind, the goal being that we've imparted the skill and knowledge. Okay, so after develop, we've now got the organization is implementing the new strategy. They're in the new direction. So I think that earlier you said about the design principles, you circle back. This is the time.
Yeah, that should be probably at the end of the liver stage. Missed it. But yeah, you should be going back to that and saying, did we deliver against these? Or almost not necessarily deliver against it, because it's hard to do that. But maybe if we said we wanted to be, let's say, self-directed, what are the pieces in the design that show that we are doing this? And it might be that you've got set up with, multidisciplinary teams that can make decisions on their own.
Yeah. With
very little sign-off required. And in the detail, you'll have the boundaries about what those decisions can be and so on. But I think it's useful to go back and say, oh, you want it to be self-directed. Here are the bits in the design that have given you that.
Yeah.
And therefore you can walk away and say, yeah, we tick that box, right? We've trained the people, we've pulled them together. They know how often they need to meet. They know that they can make these decisions, and therefore, self-directed.
Yeah.
In develop, it kind of takes root and it gets a bit more mature. But at the end of the liver stage, you should be able to say it's built in there, and people are clear how that's happening.
So the reflection, feedback loop, how are we going? The acknowledgement that you said this at the beginning. Here's the evidence-based you talked about earlier. Here's the evidence that you're doing it. So you can say, pat on the back, you're good. The frequency, cadence, you're going to catch up, group together, and continuously improve.
Yeah. And it might be, some cases, it might be just you've built it into the design, and the organization needs to work on the maturity of actually making that come to life.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in there. It's part of the kind of the framework. It's part of something that's been developed. Yeah,
that's an interesting word there, maturity. That is, maturity. That's like the current client, I won't say any names because there's the current client. And it's like, well, I was told when I started, the maturity in terms of project management is quite low. And so part of our role is to help bring that up. And so, so the first bit, it was a kudos to the team, the change team then, it was they recognized that. As the current state is that these people don't used to change transformation projects, so we'll be holding their hand quite a lot of the time. And as opposed to beating them over the head with, you don't understand that? Why not? Okay, so you said there's a key part there, maturity, understanding the maturity.
Yeah, and it's different everywhere, right? And sometimes it is very much based on the individuals again, not the organisation as a whole. So it can be mixed. It might be really mature in one area within an organisation, but another area is still quite fledgling, and it needs to go through that cycle. Build up a bit of experience first.
Okay, now the last point, point 3. Now, the years of experience, the different organizations, sectors. Well, no, that's the qualification, but the validation is like, we're not talking, and this is not like I've had people who want to get on the podcast and they're new, and it's like they're new to the career, new to the industry, and so it's good. Honored that you want to come on. We have a chat. You'll probably be better learning from the experienced people who have we tried hands, is that, or safe hands, trusted hands. They've been through this before. They've got the scars, got the t-shirt. Yeah, so you have been through it before, and I find it interesting was when you speak to people like in my network, and It's like, the stories that you guys have got is like so rich, and that no one would know about this if you didn't talk about it. And there's some things that, and then I would even say caveat from the beginning would be that we have met before, we just haven't been in the same country. But this is the issues like symptomatic of the industry, not unique to UK or USA, where it's like, okay, so guys, if you're coming into these change and transformation programs, and it's like you said it earlier, like as an individual who's reluctant to change is one thing, people are by nature adverse to change. When you put them in an organization with other people and you try to change that organization with lots of people, how do you do that? It's like one person trying to change on their own is, even you give them all the skills and all the tools, but they don't want to do it. When you put a group of people together and you want them to change, you go, well, there's a process to this, because if you get it wrong, everyone's going to just cross their arms and say, nah, not for me.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So
what have I learned over these many decades of working in this field? I think probably one of them is you can't communicate enough.
Communicate.
Yeah. And certainly with your client and your stakeholders, because sometimes the communication is from you to the client and then the client to their people.
Yeah.
And because they need to own it and people need to believe they mean it. Otherwise, if you own too much of it, if it becomes embedded in the consultant, when the consultant walks away, at which point they really should, then, the kind of the heart of understanding why certain decisions were made also walks away. And that can be quite damaging for an organization, because it leaves the leadership team without that joint passion about why they did it, and that belief in it is the right solution, and we know why we made these decisions because we believed in them and we made them at this point for these particular reasons. And they may not be the perfect solution, but it's a solution that worked for us at that point, at a time. And this is why we did it. And I think that's important. So communicate until you're blue in the face. And I think also we touched on it slightly earlier. I think it's know your own lines, know your own boundaries. I think I've not done it often, but I have walked away from clients because sometimes the reason they want to make a change is just because they're new and they want to make a change. And when you look at how much disruption that can cause and how much heartache that can cause, because there's no real reason for doing it. Yeah. I think you need to question, is there something I want to be part of? And I think there's other things as well about, how people are being treated within an organization. I think you need to understand what your own lines are,
boundaries. And
hold tight to that, because those are the things that will come back to haunt you in the middle of the night in 15 years' time. And you think, I should have spoken up when that person didn't get the proper chance to really go for that role. Because, they weren't the favorite child. Yeah. And so I think you really need to be true to yourself morally, because you have quite a lot of power coming in as external consultant. You're kind of free of the politics. Yes. You're free of the history. You're coming in with eyes wide open, and you can see things as an outsider for that period of time. And you need to really respect that what you believe and your values are just as important as what the organization is. And sometimes it's the right thing to do to speak up, and sometimes it's the right thing to do to walk away. I would say, you don't have to do what the client asks you to do. You are there to give them what they want, but sometimes you're not the right person to do it. And you need to respect that for yourself as well.
Yeah, I've been in a situation there where I was asked to change. I was asked to change a recommendation on a pack that I'd put together. It was outsourcing roles to India. And it was for a bank. I won't need to mention the name, this name. And even the COO out in India, who had a couple of hundred, I think 400 or 800 headcount, and he was about to double it. And he would, in terms of bonus and everything else, him and his organization would be happy. It's great. But the issue was, it was in one part of India where the time zone wasn't GMT. They did it in India Standard Time. They were late to the market. The cost, that means the local talent was already in the competitors. They had to headhunt. They didn't have a location, so they had to buy. The time zone was different, so the service that we're providing here would be disjointed, wouldn't get any the connection for the. And so even the CEO, who was was rubbing his hands about how much he could make, he goes, of all the benefits here, I don't recommend you do it because of these reasons. And everyone said, don't do it. But the client had already gone to the market and said, we're doing it. And so I came back with a recommendation and said that your team has said, don't do it for these different reasons. It's going to destroy one, reputation, customers, and ultimately revenue. And the return you think is not there. And I said, can you change it? So change it to recommend doing. And I said, no, if I change it and it goes pear-shaped, which looks highly likely, you're going to come back to me and say, so, I could stay here and help you go and do that transformation forever, but that's the wrong decision. And so I said, no, there it is. And that was my last day.
Yeah, that happens. And sometimes afterwards you think, well, thank goodness for that.
No moral dilemma. It was like, that was the best decision. I think, for the organization. Someone else can wear that decision, but ethically and morally, I think it was the right decision. So for those consultants there, is to stand by your morals.
Yeah. And you're kind of the critical friend, right? That's a phrase we use quite a lot in consulting. And I think sometimes you do need to challenge appropriately and in front of the right people, right?
Yes.
Make a workshop. But that is part of your job to perhaps be the no person when they're surrounded by yes people, or the person that can stand up to them because they're not scared for their job. And sometimes it is at the cost of that particular contract, but you live and learn. And I think sometimes there are lines you just need to respect.
Oh yeah. I have no qualms. That's one of a few that I was happily thank you, but no thank you. Honesty is the best policy.
Yeah.
Okay, so So go ahead.
Yeah, so those two things I think are the most important for me. It's like know your lines and communication. Communication is just fundamental to all of this. Organizations are people. Yeah, there's tech, but it's people. If you've got a brilliant strategy, but nobody's implementing it, then it's rubbish. If you've got a brilliant design, but nobody's living it, then it's rubbish. If you've got brilliant tech, but everybody's ignoring it and doing it on the back of a fag packet, then it's rubbish.
Yeah.
You have to get your people working together and you have to engage them in order to do that. And you have to listen to them and hear what they're telling you and respect their expertise and fact that they've lived it. They are speaking to clients every day. And there's things that they know from that experience that you can't find out in 3 months of discovery.
Yeah.
You just can't. You don't get to that level of detail. And sometimes you don't need to know that level of detail, right? That sometimes you say, okay, so that will happen in your develop phase. Trust you guys are going to figure that through. I've given you the walls and the ceiling. The rest, we can work on together. But it is about trusting people and communicating well with them and
okay, so a lot of trust. As you said there, I like that you said if your strategy is good but you can't implement it, design is good but it's not delivering, your tech is people working around it, then the whole thing, as much as you try, is rubbish. So it all comes back to people. And so your words there was your organization is about people.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah
Awesome.
I think treating people as people, right? Treat them as you would like to be treated.
And that is coming from you don't like the words, but a senior experienced organization design expert, not organization development, OD, organization design, is that communicate, have your own values, know yourself, and so what you're willing to accept and not accept. And then be the critical friend, don't be afraid to challenge. And understanding I think the summary of that part is that the people in your organization know your business best and you should listen to them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
My final one is remember, it's got to be bespoke.
Oh, yes. And bespoke. Yes. Bespoke. There is no cookie cutter approach. Bespoke.
That's right.
Yep. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, audience, despite what you're told or hear, there is no cookie cutter. As Erika said earlier, that no organization strategy is the same. Therefore, your organization design would not be the same as the other. Likewise, your strategy will not be the same. Your people, your culture, your processes, maybe your tech might be similar to someone else's, but those combined is not the same. Therefore, an off-the-shelf approach will not do. You need to customize it. It needs to be bespoke.
Absolutely.
All right. So we got there. All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you very much, Erika. We'll wrap it up there. So if people want to get a hold of you, I'll put your contact details in the show notes. Get your LinkedIn and the details. If there's, I'll put a few quotes in there for you that I've quoted you for, and when it's up, about 1 or 2 weeks. It'll be up on YouTube. I think we'll put it up there first. I'll tag you when I put it on LinkedIn, and then you can share it amongst your network. And yeah, hopefully it looks good.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Good
Thank you for your
talking to
time.
you.
Have a good night.
Take
Okay.
care.
Cheers. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.